Hello and welcome to the webinar. Thanks so much for joining us. The topic today is looking forward to 2023, security readiness with Veeam Platform v12. We've got a great event lined up for you today. This event is presented in partnership, of course, with our friends at Veeam. Now, before we get started, there's a few things that you should know about the webinar. I should mention my name is David Davis of ActionTech Media, and I'm glad to be serving as the host here at ActionTech Media. We're all former IT professionals ourselves, and we're very aware of how tough and challenging it can be out there in the world of IT. And we want this event to be educational. We want to help you to solve your data protection and security challenges. And so we encourage your questions. The team from Veeam is standing by to answer those questions, and we'll be doing our best to get to all of them. We also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event. You can ask those questions there in the questions pane of your audience console. I see many of you have already said hello, good afternoon, hola, from across the United States and around the world. So we appreciate that, but we also want your technical questions about the Veeam solution. We also encourage you to check out the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a link right at the top to get started with the Veeam solution, and they've got a ton of great resources over there at veeam.com. At the end of the webinar, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing would have already occurred. The prize terms can be found right there in the handouts tab of your audience console. And then I should also mention we also have a best question prize for an additional $50 gift card. You must ask a question, of course, to be entered into the drawing, and we'll select the best question winner after the event. All right, with that information out of the way, it's now time to move on to today's topic. And I'm excited to welcome now our expert presenter. Welcome to Matt Crape, who is a Senior Technical Product Manager at Veeam. Matt, it's great to hand it off to you. It's great to have you. Take it away.
Hello, and thanks for joining me today. My name is Matt Crape. I'm a Senior Technical Product Marketer here at Veeam, and we're here to talk about security readiness best practices, both with things that you could do today, as well as what you'll be able to accomplish with the Veeam Platform v12 with its upcoming release. With the year quickly coming to a close and with the upcoming release of the v12 platform, we wanted to take the time to share some security best practices. Many organizations this time of year have change freezes coming up, or maybe they're defining their plans for 2023. Regardless of what the end of year process looks like for your organization, security should be an important part of that. We'll be talking about some security best practices which you can implement today. The session's broken down into guidance that any IT department can use right now, regardless of whether or not you are a Veeam customer. We'll also be touching on some best practices which can be implemented with Veeam Backup and Replication v11, along with some of the improvements in the upcoming v12 platform release. At the end of the day, especially as we head into the holiday season, we want to ensure that you have a secure and resilient infrastructure. So security is an iterative process. It shouldn't be something that we set up once and then we walk away from. I'm sure many of us have been in this situation. We've had an audit that was just performed, or maybe a new tool was deployed. Findings are then reviewed and corrective actions are taken when needed. Unfortunately, the process typically stops there. Security is something that needs to be continually revisited and reviewed. It should not be an action which was taken at a single point in time. As threat vectors increase and methods of intrusion become more sophisticated, we're seeing situations where security is being thwarted. In some cases, it's a matter of a fix is available, but just hasn't been applied yet. At the end of the day, the risks and the threats to your environment are relentless. Having a strong and up-to-date security posture is one of the biggest defenses against attackers. What worked as a defense yesterday may not work as a defense tomorrow. That's to say, we need to continually look at these things, make sure that they're working as we expect them to work, and make sure that we're secure. Over the last 10 years, the security industry has realized modern ransomware protection requires a layered security defense. While the initial attack vector hasn't really changed, with over 80% of email on the internet being spam, we've accepted that attacks will get through. After all, no spam filter is 100% accurate. But think about it like this. The attackers have to make a small monitoring investment, and they have an unlimited amount of time to attack you, and they only need to be successful once to make a profit. Defenders, on the other hand, have to be 100% accurate 100% of the time to avoid a costly breach. It's simply not possible. This is why security teams are investing in instant response tools and services to react faster once a breach is detected. A common criteria for success, however, is the restoration of data from a reliable backup to ensure that the data and the attack has been contained. Containing the breach and proving you have not lost data means there's no need to pay a ransom and hope that your data is recoverable. The bottom line is having a verifiable and immutable backup system as the last line of defense against ransomware and modern attacks allows you to be resilient when all other defenses fail. When it comes to securing a data center, the common challenges that we typically see fall under one of these silos. Since 2020, we've seen a massive surge in the amount of online business-related traffic. This has pushed a lot of organizations to strive for a zero tolerance for downtime policy. Unfortunately, in order to accomplish this, complex and highly available infrastructure is often needed. And this presents its own set of challenges for situations that involve things like post-patching and reboots. From the ransomware perspective, it's prevalent and it's here to stay. According to some independent data collected as part of our annual Data Protection Trends report, cyber attacks caused the most impactful outages for organizations in each of 2020, 2021, and 2022. In 2021, 76% of organizations were successfully attacked by ransomware at least once. In 2022, when that same question was posed, 85% of respondents answered yes to that. Some of the challenges, though, when it comes to keeping data safe from ransomware, are things such as how long do you actually keep your data for to ensure that it's clean? It's not uncommon for ransomware to have a timer in there that says, you know what, only activate in 3 months or 6 months. So having backups that go that far back in time is critical, but there's also the storage component that comes with that. Do you have the capacity to store those, and are you able to store those securely? Additionally, along those lines, how do you actually protect that data from attackers? The more volume of data that we're storing, the more storage that we need, and we need places to actually keep this, whether it's on premises or in the cloud or some other option. Maybe your organization has rules around compliance. Maybe there's restrictions on not only how long you need to keep the data, but also where you can keep it. Locality rules might limit which cloud providers that you could be used, if any. Then you have regulations like GDPR, which add complications when dealing with challenges, such as securely storing data, but also adhering to the requirements, such as the right to be forgotten. We see some common recovery challenges that quite often reflect upon constraints, whether it's staff or resources, such as compute, storage, and whatnot. During incidents, it could be difficult to get the resources that you need. From a people perspective, people are typically pulled all over in these all-hands situations, and it can be hard to get the skill sets that you need to help you with the problem that you have at hand. The last thing you want to have someone say during an incident like this is, I think this will work. You really want to have that confidence that you know your backups will be there to save the day. And as data sets keep growing, so do restore times. So this is why it's important to develop a strategy to make sure that you restore just the information that you need. If you have 100 terabytes that possibly need to be restored, but you're able to say, hey, you know what, we only need to restore 5 terabytes of the data that's affected, that can have a huge impact on getting your business back up and running. And lastly, we've seen such a surge in remote users. Beginning in 2020, just about everyone was working remotely in some capacity. And now, although we are starting to see a shift back to the office, it's still very much a hybrid approach where a lot of organizations are saying, yes, you can work remote 2 or 3 days a week, but the rest of the time you're in the office. Where this creates a real challenge from the security perspective is all these users are using their corporate laptops in what could be deemed as an unsecured environment, i.e. their home, the coffee shops, and so forth. In a traditional corporate network, it's easy enough to put policies in place to ensure that nothing gets past the perimeter firewalls, but that's not always the case in home environments. So all these laptops are all of a sudden access points potentially into the network, which can lead to new attack vectors. As mentioned on the previous slide, ransomware is not going away. It is the #1 threat to your data, and it's something that keeps many IT professionals up at night. Active defenses will only block so much, and we have to assume that our defenses will be breached at some point, or possibly that they already are. Veeam believes that the best offense is a solid defense against ransomware. Everything we do is designed to help you build a robust strategy for protecting your data. We provide data security solutions that can help you ensure your data is safe and reliably available when you do need it. To help you accomplish this, Veeam provides a platform that allows you to protect your data with immutable storage, detect and monitor your data for threats, giving you the added visibility to your existing defenses and ensure that your data that you restore isn't going to reintroduce the threat. But most importantly, we provide automated testing and verification because paying a ransom should not be more reliable than your backups. Those of you who have managed backups in the past are likely aware of the 3-2-1 rule. The 3-2-1 rule says that there should be at least 3 copies of important data on at least 2 different types of media, with at least one of these copies being offsite. Although this strategy is still the gold standard for protecting your data, modern malware is known to attack the backup layer, so you need to have a process in place to ensure resilience. That's why we've created what we call the 3-2-1-1-0 rule for data recovery. We recommend that in addition to the 3-2-1 rule, at least one copy of that data be resilient, either through being air-gapped, offline, or immutable. This is imperative for effectively defending yourself against ransomware. We've also added a 0 to the rule because automated backup verification ensures that your data is valid and usable for recoveries. You cannot recover data that has been captured or captured incorrectly, and you do not want to be finding this out while you're performing a restore. Testing and verification is never a fun task and is unfortunately one that gets skipped all too often. Common complaints and concerns usually revolve around the time needed to orchestrate recovery tests or the lack of capacity or resources in the environment to use for testing. We'll dive into this a little bit later when talking about sure backup, as well as how we can perform tests at scale. As mentioned previously, one of the first steps to developing a successful business resiliency strategy for your data is to have a secure and protected environment. This includes not only your production workloads, such as virtual machines and physical servers, but also your backups. To start things off, let's talk about physical security. Some of this may seem like common sense, but malicious threat actors routinely gain access to networks by exploiting a gap in physical security. A great example is a situation where a threat actor shows up at an office under the guise of delivering packages. It's easy enough to place the large boxes on a receptionist's desks, and behind the stack and out of view, a USB thumb drive might be inserted into the receptionist's computer. In this example, physically securing that front desk machine from easy access could be something as simple as mounting it out of reach under the desk. Similarly, some organizations go as far as disabling USB ports in the computer's BIOS, physically disconnecting them from the motherboard, or filling the slots with something like epoxy. Although this may sound extreme, it can be a good countermeasure to combat situations when a network system is exposed. Similarly, other steps such as physically locking server racks, server rooms, and offices in general can assist with this. For areas that are restricted, for example, such as server rooms or data centers, make sure that the access is limited. Not only should this access be limited, but should be regularly reviewed for changes. All too often, HR departments do not notify security or IT of employees who have left. Similarly, it should be evaluated if the users on the list actually require access, and if so, can or should this access be limited to specific areas? And lastly, when building this list, also consider who may require access during an incident. If a DR event is invoked, you do not want to find out that when your primary contact is unavailable, that your secondary contact is not on the authorized user list. If possible, surveillance options such as video cameras should also be considered, particularly for public and sensitive areas. Spots like front desk reception would hopefully capture threat actors who try to social engineer their way into the office. Additionally, other sensitive areas like server rooms or parking lots should be monitored. The latter is important should there be a need to identify a vehicle associated with an incident. Lastly, it's important to review this data, such as footage and access logs, even when there's no known instance. This can help verify that only approved and known staff are accessing resources at times that you would expect them to access it. Lastly, don't forget those remote or branch offices. Typically, these will be smaller in size, both physically and from a headcount perspective. What this means as well is typically the same resources as head office, such as dedicated server rooms or security equipment, might not be available. In many cases, larger offices are given the gold treatment by security. They will have not only physical security systems in place, but likely tools like intrusion detection and prevention systems. Branch offices quite often will not have these, but they may still have unfettered access back to the large offices via VPNs. Consider treating each office as a different security zone or domain. All traffic passed back and forth should be analyzed and monitored. In the event of a breach at a branch office, having the ability to quickly compartmentalize and cut off access to the business can save from significant damages. From an infrastructure point of view, use security features that you may have available when possible. So for example, the Trusted Platform module chips, which are commonly available in most new hardware servers, and they do not cost a lot of money, but it will give you an additional layer of security that could be used. TPM 2.0 works for ESXi hosts, starting with vSphere 6.7 and newer. Take a look at, for example, your storage array. Are you able to use storage data at rest encryption? Is that an option? Are there any drawbacks to that? Make sure you understand and isolate your network traffic. So this could be applied to a couple of different things. If you have out-of-band management, such as IPMI, IDRAC, or ILO interfaces, those should be on their own management network. The last thing you want to find is that during an incident, when your network is down, is that you still can't access your servers from the out-of-band management. Similarly, you should apply the principle of least privilege on these interfaces. If someone doesn't need access to these, they shouldn't be able to access it, plain and simple. Also consider what, if any, encryption is needed for your traffic on your network. Should your backup jobs be sending encrypted data? Similarly, if you're using network services such as SSH, ensure that strong hashing algorithms are used. Another thing you want to do is have a consistent lifecycle policy. What I mean by this is treat your workloads, whether they're physical or virtual, in the same manner. Make sure you patch them regularly, you protect them with required updates, or if there's firewall rules, as well as just make sure that they are adherent to your security requirements. When possible, use hardened templates. This allows you to deploy a security instance from the get-go, a secure instance from the get-go rather. So it's not a matter of deploying the OS, having to go in and run through a checklist to make something secure, when you could just have it secure right from the start. Additionally, make sure you remove any unneeded components. For example, on the Windows machine, if you're not using the IIS service, make sure that's not on there. Otherwise, that's just another attack vector. Even Microsoft has started taking this approach with their server OSs. You can now install the OS and only have a command line interface and no GUI, because that is a whole other attack vector. Getting a little more Veeam focused, you'll want to understand your availability requirements. One of the challenges I called out earlier was around achieving zero downtime. This could be critical, not just for your business related workloads such as e-commerce systems, but also for other workloads, whether it's security systems, for example. When developing an incident response plan, you should consider what other workloads need to be protected. For example, do you have a network intrusion prevention system that requires a high level of availability? For instances such as this, continuous data protection is a tool to consider. CDP allows administrators to create very granular restore intervals down to seconds by leveraging continuous replication. The level of protection is typically reserved for critical workloads, which need extremely low recovery point and recovery time objectives. Because we sometimes don't know how far back we need to recover from, for example, if we don't know if a system was infected with ransomware, CDP allows you to configure both short-term and long-term retention points. This really gives you the flexibility to roll back to a wide range of recovery points. One of the great things about this feature is the fact that it leverages VMware's vSphere APIs for I/O filtering, also known as VIO. So these filters allow partners such as Veeam to read virtual machine data with little to no impact to performance. And these APIs and this usage is also completely supported by VMware. Another really cool thing about this is it gives you the ability to easily measure if you're hitting your SLA targets, so like your RPOs. If you start missing your replication points, Veeam Backup and Replication will start to generate warnings to advise you of this, and you can start your investigation. If you're not familiar with the term immutable as it relates to storage, it essentially means that once your data is written to disk, it cannot be erased until, or altered for that matter, until a specified period of time has elapsed. Why is this an important feature? Simple. It prevents changes from being written to your backup files. So let's use ransomware as an example. Once the malicious user makes its way onto your network, or the malicious code, it will start encrypting any data that it can find. If it somehow finds its way to your backup repository, then your backups will be inaccessible as they will be encrypted, unless they are sitting on immutable storage, in which case the ransomware will not be able to alter the files, and therefore will not be able to encrypt them. Similarly, if you have a rogue employee who is looking to cause damage, immutable storage would prevent them from deleting the data. With V11, backups can be written directly to Linux repositories, which can leverage the immutable flag, which is part of the ext3 file system. As part of the deployment, Veeam Backup and Replication will leverage single-use credentials as part of the deployment. If you're not familiar with single-use credentials, these are credentials that are only used once to deploy the Veeam data mover, while adding it to a Linux server in the backup infrastructure. These credentials do not store the backup. These credentials are not stored in the backup infrastructure, so that backups will be safe even if the Veeam Backup and Replication server is compromised. For situations that require immutable storage at scale, V11 scale-up backup repositories can be used to achieve this. By using S3 compatible storage as the backing storage for these repositories, immutability can be set as part of the policy. When object storage is being used, immutability is achieved by using the native S3 object lock feature. Today, capacity tiers can leverage S3 compatible storage, whether on-site or in the cloud. Archive storage tier can currently only be used by Amazon S3 Glacier. As a piece of advice though, when enabling any sort of immutability, ensure that you check and double check your calculations. The last thing you want to do is put a policy in place for say 60 days of immutability, only to run out of storage partway through. You would then be stuck with a repository which has run out of space with no easy way to clear out that space. Adding additional storage to the repository might be one solution. However, it is not something necessarily that could be done quickly or easily or without financial cost. With Veeam Backup and Replication V12, we're going to be seeing some great advancements coming. First off, deploying a Linux hardened repository will now be easier. The process will be much more streamlined with the intent of making it more accessible for organizations or teams which may not have the skills or time to properly manage these deployments. The process will still be using the single-use credentials to provide an additional layer of security. Lastly, those of you with sharp eyes will notice that there will be no option to turn immutability off. these repositories will only support immutability. The traditional Linux repository with immutable storage will still be available though. Additionally, we'll see the ability to write backups directly to object storage. Today, object storage can only be used as part of the scale-out backup repository. However, with the upcoming v12 release, we'll be able to write backups directly to object storage. Similar to the benefits that we already see today, the new direct-to-object repository will support immutability as well by utilizing the S3 object lock feature. Additionally, should you want to leverage this for long-term retention, such as GFS, so the grandfather, father, son policy, restore points will be protected for the entire retention period as well. As with hardened Linux repositories, single-use credentials will give you another instance of layered security. The direct-to-object storage option is a great alternative for situations where teams may not have the required or desired level of Linux knowledge. Object storage will provide that simple and low overhead method of implementing immutability. You can see on the screenshot here, you're able to select, hey, you know what? I want immutability for X number of days, and it's as simple as that. From an access and authentication standpoint, the console for Veeam Backup and Replication v12 will include additions such as being able to assist customers with their security and compliance needs. First off will be the ability to use multi-factor authentication. Setup is as simple as a single checkbox, and after enabling it, the next time the user tries to log on, they'll be prompted to set up MFA on the device. Authenticators such as Microsoft Authenticator will be fully supported. The process is as simple as scanning the QR code, entering the code from the app. Once verified, the user will be prompted for their MFA code each time they log in. Should you have a service account in use, MFA can be disabled for specific accounts. Additionally, if MFA is enabled, security groups cannot be used as part of the user and role setup. When taking a layered security approach, it's also highly recommended that the OS which Veeam Backup Replication is running on be secured with MFA. Third-party solutions such as Duo can be used to assist with ensuring that only valid users are accessing the server in the first place. Additionally, there will now be an option to auto-log off users after a specified period of time. This is something that we've heard from a lot of users that they require as part of their security policies. So expect that coming in v12. Application-aware image processing is an important feature to ensure that data is backed up reliably. In short, it's a process that interacts with the guest OS to ensure that an accurate and healthy point-in-time copy of an application is captured as part of the backup. A common example would be a database application. If application-aware processing is not used, then the crash-consistent backup is created. This is generally the equivalent of copying everything that's been written to disk. The problem comes in the form of applications which may still have data in memory. By using application-aware processing, Veeam is able to interact with the guest OS and request a volume shadow copy snapshot, which is able to quiesce the application's memory and commit all the outstanding in-memory writes to disk. In order to do this, though, the guest OS credentials need to be provided for that interaction. With v12, group managed service accounts will be used, which will allow for ad hoc queries to Active Directory for credentials. Similar to the single-use credentials, which we talked about earlier, GMSA does not store the passwords with Veeam. Rather, they're all stored within Active Directory. Some other benefits of using GMSA include these are strong 240-byte randomly generated complex passwords, which essentially makes brute force attacks highly ineffective. And additionally, passwords are regularly changed and automatically changed every 30 days. New in v12 will also be a built-in best practices analyzer. The analyzer, which could be run on demand, will check for common misconfigurations and advise you as to what is violating a best practice. By being able to run it on demand, you can make the required changes, such as enabling or disabling services, and then rerun it again. Depending on organizational requirements, Backup administrators may be able to use these findings to assist with audits and compliance requirements set up by the internal security teams. And on a related note to compliance requirements set forth by security teams, V12 will introduce increased Kerberos support. As security becomes increasingly top of mind, we're seeing increased requirements coming forth from both customer-driven security teams as well as third-party cyber insurance requirements. So for environments that leverage Active Directory as part of their identity management strategy, the widened Kerberos support will provide yet another layer of security. Applying best practices and secure configurations is just one component when it comes to building a strong risk management plan. Having the tools to identify these threats early is key to minimizing the impact of when a threat does make its way onto the network, being able to see it and react quickly. Veeam 1, which is part of the Veeam Availability Suite, is designed to provide visibility and monitoring to IT professionals and business insights to key stakeholders. It's also an integral part of the Veeam platform when it comes to providing and identifying threats and working towards containment and remediation. Right out of the box, Veeam 1 provides comprehensive alerting when telltale signs of malicious activity are detected. Alarms could be triggered and administrators alerted when possible ransomware activity is taking place. When it comes time to monitoring your data and protecting it from risk, Veeam 1 can assist administrators in multiple ways. Alerts could be set for identifying unusual network performance, for example. In cases where large amounts of data are being transferred either to or from a machine in question, alerts could be configured to flag administrators. These spikes could be caused by intruders trying to exfiltrate data outside the network, which could be the precursor to a data breach. Because all workloads are different, building customized reports based on metrics such as data store write IO or memory usage can assist with identifying anomalies that should be investigated. Another very handy report built right into Veeam 1 is a protected VMs report. It's useful to see at a glance what is protected, but it's also just as useful to see what is unprotected. That's available in a separate portion of the same report. With this, you can quickly identify VMs which are not being backed up. This is a great report to hand over to application owners to ensure that they are aware of any unprotected workloads and remediate as necessary. As a quick example, in this report snapshot, we see that there are 93 unprotected VMs. In addition to a report such as this, you could pull out a list of the unprotected VMs and hand it over, as I mentioned. When ransomware attacks, it encrypts files which exist on the guest OS. Because these files are drastically changed, they typically have the byproduct of creating a suddenly large backup file. Veeam 1 has built-in report to help identify and alert when incremental backup files seemingly increase drastically in size. Because encryption is also a CPU-heavy task, high CPU usage levels can be another indication of a problem, particularly when there's a large volume of disk writes occurring at the same time. When these two actions occur for any extended period of time, Veeam 1's possible ransomware activity alarm can go off, notifying key users. These alarms can all be customized and tweaked to fine-tune settings, for example, such as the CPU usage threshold, data store write rates, network transmit rates, as well as specifying the length of time that these changes or thresholds have to be crossed within. Furthermore, you could create multiple versions of these alerts to apply to different scopes of workloads. You may have some workloads that experience CPU spikes routinely, so you may only want to monitor network and data store stats. Or the inverse may be true if you have an application which uses heavy network bandwidth. At the end of the day, it's important to cut down on as many false positives as possible. We've all experienced alert fatigue. We get so many false positives that we stop verifying whether or not an incident is actually occurring. By creating customized and tailored alerts for your various workloads, you can actually obtain an increased level of confidence and visibility. We've already touched on immutability and why it could be such a strong asset when it comes to protecting your data. Coming in Veeam 1 V12 is a new immutable workloads report, which will allow you to quickly identify which of your backup jobs are or are not storing their backup files on immutable storage. The breakdown will include details such as overall number of workloads protected or not protected by immutability, total number of restore points stored on immutable storage, and totals by workload type. In the perfect world, all of your backups would be locked away safely on immutable storage. However, this is not always possible in the real world. This report can help you identify what backups are at the greatest risk, and if need be, you can use this as a discussion point when it comes to reviewing your protection strategy with some key stakeholders. With the addition of direct object backup in Veeam Backup Replication 12, there's a lot of customer excitement as S3 object locks will make the path to immutability all that much easier. With that in mind, Veeam 1 will be expanding many of its existing reports to fully evaluate and embrace immutability. We've talked about ransomware detection and leveraging immutability, but we haven't touched base on malicious insiders. Regular auditing of jobs is an important step when it comes to providing a strong security stance. Being alert about a job's success or failures is something that many of us have taken for granted. An email shows up, we see that the job is successful, and we move on with our day. An area that many professionals don't spend a lot of time on is auditing for changes. Being able to pull up a list of when the backup jobs were altered and by who is something that should be done regularly as well. If a VM was removed from a job, it's important to understand who did that and why. Fortunately, Veeam 1 also has multiple audit jobs reports built into it as well. I've been talking a lot about identifying threats, typically from ransomware or threat actor. However, there is one other threat that the vast majority of organizations are aware of, but don't do enough about. I'm referring to testing your backups regularly. An untested backup isn't really a backup after all. Ultimately, it's the recovery that we care about. The worst time to realize that your backups failed is during a crisis. Backups are easy, but recovery is hard. And what I mean by that is there are a multitude of things that could go wrong during a recovery. Maybe application-aware processing wasn't turned on and critical database information was missed. Another example might be a pending OS reboot due to a patch installation. If a crash-consistent backup was taken, the OS may not boot up properly because of this. In short, testing your recovery is a critical step and one that is unfortunately skipped all too often. Back in 2010, Veeam introduced a feature called Sure Backup, and its premise is simple. Take your backups, perform a full-fledged restore in the sandbox environment. As part of the process, VMs are booted up and customized tests can be run against them to ensure the VM is behaving as expected. For example, if you have an Active Directory server, tests can be run to ensure that services such as DNS and VMware tools are responding after the test restore. In the event that you have dependencies, like say a web server, a database server, and domain controller, application groups can be created to bring all three of these up at once and test. If that isn't enough for you, there's also the ability to add your own custom testing scripts to the process. Once all this is run in an automatic fashion, the VMs are spun down, all changes are discarded so that your backups are back to the original state, and the job completion alert is created. Testing your backups isn't something that many folks would consider fun, but with Sure Backup, a lot of this actually can be automated for you. Earlier on, we covered best practices around keeping your backup secure. That's the first step in ensuring a successful recovery. After all, if your backups are compromised, you have nothing to recover from. And we just wrapped up the importance of detecting risks. These risks could range from ransomware holding your data hostage to an insider threat who might be slowly sabotaging your recovery process. Or lastly, maybe your own worst enemy, an untested backup. Next up, let's talk about the most important part of any backup plan, the recovery portion. Without a way to recover, everything else is a bit of a moot point. With Veeam Backup and Recovery V11, there are 91 different ways to recover your data. To put this in context, back when I presented at VeeamON in 2018, this number was 57 for version 9.5. So why do I mention this? That's because Veeam is continually looking at ways to let you get your data back up and running. As technologies change, Veeam is continually looking at not only how to protect those workloads, but we also want to give you the flexibility to recover the data that you need where you need it. With this many options, there's a ton of flexibility. But with that, it's important to also understand the freedom from vendor lock-in provided by data mobility. Data mobility is something that's top of mind for a lot of enterprises. Why is it so important? Well, for starters, nobody wants to be locked into a specific cloud or vendor. Having flexibility to choose where your data is restored to is one of Veeam's strengths, and is something that we are continually innovating on. Sometimes we might have to restore to new locations with very short notice. Many people are surprised that during a ransomware attack, law enforcement can actually seize an entire data center as evidence. This essentially creates that smoking hole scenario, but you can still see the building. Scenarios like this is why it's important to understand how Veeam's data mobility approach can get you back up and running quickly. Additionally, this portability is not just restricted to virtual machines. For example, Veeam Backup and Replication has the ability to take a backup of a physical machine created by a Veeam agent and restore it to Microsoft Azure. This in of itself has many implications. For example, if your physical host has been seized or has experienced a hardware failure, you don't need to wait for a replacement host to arrive to get the workload up and running. If your organization is looking at cloud migration strategy, restoring a backup to the cloud could be an easy win. At the end of the day, proper recovery planning is key. Where things get really complex, though, is when it comes time to develop, test, and execute an entire DR plan. As I mentioned earlier, the worst time to realize your backups failed is during a crisis. Sadly, a crisis also seems to be the time when teams realize that there are holes in the recovery plan. Sure, backup is a great way to test a subset of your backups, but there are many other components involved with truly testing and verifying your backups. Tasks such as creating documentation or performing full restores at scale and measuring your recovery time objectives. Testing, verification, automation, and orchestration are requirements to ensure a fast, secure, and reliable recovery. Unfortunately, many organizations do not have the resources readily available to cover these requirements. With the upcoming release of Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator v6, Veeam provides the ability to create and maintain a comprehensive recovery plan and stress test that plan to give you and your leadership confidence in your strategy. Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator is designed to be a vital tool in your tool belt when it comes to addressing the challenges with ensuring your fast and secure recovery. It leverages the best practices that we've talked about with Veeam Backup and Replication and Veeam One and takes things to the next level. From the DR perspective, VDRO can create dynamic documentation or update existing documentation for all of your DR plans. Additionally, Veeam Data Labs are leveraged for zero impact testing, which allows you to fully test restore plans in a completely sandboxed environment. This also means that you can reliably test your recovery time objective to know with confidence that you will actually be able to meet your SLAs. When it comes to orchestration, custom tasks and sequences can actually be defined, allowing you to bring workloads up in specific orders and restore to specific locations, whether the original location, such as an on-prem vSphere installation, or to a new location, such as within an Azure instance. It also brings, as I mentioned, flexibility with regards to restore locations, which is a key requirement for DR, as we can't assume that the source location is still available. Using VDRO, plans could be created to bring workloads up in net new locations. So features such as Cloud DR, it will allow you to restore a virtual machine or workloads protected by Veeam Agent directly to Azure in the event that your physical data center is unavailable. In the event that you have ample capacity within your vSphere environment, Orchestrator can automatically recover your physical or agent backups directly to your vSphere environment. And lastly, we've got Clean DR, which in order to ensure that you're not restoring a backup which contains threat, Clean DR can actually scan restore points as part of the recovery process to ensure that the data that is being restored does not contain that malicious code or the threat vector that initially brought you offline. When combined, Veeam Backup and Replication, Veeam 1 and Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator provide a comprehensive platform that can provide peace of mind for your data security and recovery needs. Together, these tools provide automated testing and recovery for every workload and the ability to stage workloads prior to recovery to ensure that data is clean and everything works as expected. The net result of all this is that you're able to achieve reduced risk by providing DR for all the applications that you want to protect. You're able to maximize the uptime by having these automated failover plans kick in when needed. And you're able to, importantly, prove compliance to your key stakeholders by saying, yes, you know what, we've tested this. We were able to bring up this entire plan within X number of minutes. Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator can also save you time by automating your documentation, which is a task that very few of us enjoy doing. It'll let you create no-touch scheduled DR tests, being able to say, you know what, let's test this plan at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. You don't need to be sitting there watching it going through. It will do this automatically for you. And lastly, as mentioned, allowing verification of applications, being able to take your entire plan, whether it consists of 1, 3, 5, 20 VMs, whatever it is, bring it back up and actually verify, yes, all those services are talking and working as expected. And lastly, it will let you restore the confidence, right? You'll be able to improve your DR preparedness through the reporting that this generates. And you'll be able to avoid RPO and RTO violations because with the valid testing, you'll know that you'll be able to hit those targets beforehand. Security should be top of mind for every organization. Things are by no means getting safer as attacks get more sophisticated. At the end of the day, the best strategy requires having a well-protected and reliable backups combined with early threat detection and proven reliable DR plan. So with that, I've come to the end of the presentation here, and I'll open up for Q&A. I see that there's already a couple of questions in here, so let me go through these. So the first question, you mentioned that Sure Backup allows for custom testing. Where can I find more information on that? So yes, Sure Backup allows you to create your own custom scripts, which you can use variables for things such as IP addresses. If you say, hey, when this machine comes up, make sure it's listening at, on this IP address, you can specify a port and a command. We've actually got a KB that details a lot of this and branches out into a whole bunch of other documentation, and that KB number is 1312. Is there an ideal schedule that you should be testing a DR plan? Since these are more complicated than testing backups, that could be quite disruptive. Okay, so this is a great question, and putting my IT consultant hat on, the answer, of course, is it depends. The reason why it depends is because every organization is different. There are varying risks that they are willing to take, whether or not you agree with those or not, and the impacts due to a system outage can vary wildly. So some organizations might lose millions of dollars for each hour of downtime, while others might not lose anything. Decisions like these are important to have with your key stakeholders and businesses. Bring it up as a discussion point. It's a great opportunity to A, understand your business better. Why do they or do they not care about this? And B, it's a good chance to educate the stakeholders to the risk, to make them aware of things that they may not be previously aware of. Another question here. Is there a list of supported antivirus programs with regards to Clean DR and Sure Backup? Yes, so out of the box configurations are provided for the Semantic Protection Engine, ESET, Windows Defender, and Kaspersky Labs V10 and V11. Our Help Center actually has some documentation on how you can add other vendors as well. You can actually create XML files and put it in there, and there's support available for those. So with that, I am going to wrap this up. I'll be sticking around a little bit longer to handle some more Q&A in the chat. But thank you all very much for joining me today. And hopefully this is first step towards a safer, more secure environment.
Great presentation, Matt. That was really, really cool. I learned a lot, and we've got a ton of great questions coming in. You handled as many as you could there in the Q&A session, and I know the team from Veeam has also been helping out, so we appreciate that. Thank you to everyone for all the excellent questions. And of course, thank you to Veeam for supporting today's event. For more information on Veeam, don't forget about the handouts tab. There's a link right there at the top to get started with the Veeam solution. They've got a free trial. They've got tons of excellent resources. So I encourage you to check it out. And then before we go, I do want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. Let's see, this is going out to Amy Cox, who is in Oklahoma. Congratulations, Amy Cox from Oklahoma. And we'll be reaching out to our best question prize winner as well. I hope everyone enjoyed the event. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.